Let's get to Jenni Hibbert, who is Global Managing Partner at Heidrick and Struggles. Jenni, nice to speak to you today. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. But before we go forwards, let's have a quick look backwards as well. Did a lot of CEOs, like a lot of other people during this period, just reassess their life and decide to move on to pastures new? Have we seen a big changing of the guard?
Yeah, look, I'm delighted to be here. So thank you very much for having me. The short answer to what you're saying is yes, in part, that absolutely was the case. I mean, to restate the fact or the headline that you opened with, we did see more CEO appointments in the first half of this year we've seen since 2018. So it was a record number. That turnover, which was particularly high actually here in the UK, where the tenure of CEOs is lower than it is both at a European level and global level, can be attributed to a whole host of reasons. Some of that is just thoughtful and planned succession planning, and we're seeing a lot more of that. But some of it, as you say, is either the CEOs themselves or the boards of the publicly listed companies that they serve around, deciding that for one reason or another, that organization needs a different CEO heading out of the pandemic.
Jenni, let's cut to the chase here. As a white middle-aged man, I can say there are too many white middle-aged men leading Britain's biggest companies and global companies generally as well. Are we seeing a meaningful change in that succession, which means actually more longevity in terms of diverse trends, gender trends? Are we seeing more of this happening quickly enough?
Again, the short answer to that is no, notwithstanding what you shared about yourself. I'm disappointed to say that the data doesn't show a seismic shift in the direction of greater diversity in the CEO seat. So we did see a slight increase in the number of female CEOs appointed in the first half of this year. But remember, we saw an increase in CEO appointments across the board at the start of this year. However, standing back, the average number of female CEOs remains incredibly low at a global level. Our report tracked 24 markets, and of those 24 markets, 6% of the CEOs were female. That's 6%. Now, here in the UK, slightly better, but again, nothing that I would call dramatic. That's 8% here in the UK.
Jenni, can I ask you about those who were forced out, maybe by activist shareholders or by their own boards, compared to those who voluntarily moved on, maybe seeking a new position or retiring? What does the balance look like? Is there any evidence through this more difficult pandemic period that we've seen companies getting rid of CEOs that they don't think are up to the muster?
Look, that's not something that we specifically tracked as part of this report. I would observe that as ever, it's a balance between planned retirement or departure and unplanned retirement or departure. What I would observe, irrespective of the departure, is that what's come out again of the pandemic is the need for people to be really critical and really thoughtful about who they have in their leadership seat and succession for that going forward. And that's showing itself in terms of the number of internal appointments versus external appointments when there is a new CEO appointment. 2/3 of the appointments that we tracked this year came from the existing organisation. Here in the UK, less than 1 in 3 new CEOs was appointed externally. What I think is compelling, and we can touch on this briefly as you'd like to, is actually the background of some of those new CEOs, which looks and feels different. I would observe that on the basis of what we've seen in 2021, tomorrow's CEO is going to look and feel really quite different to yesterday's CEO. And that is a shift that we've seen in the data.
Well, let's go there, because is that about age? Is it about experience? What is it that you're seeing that redefines their experience and will shift the way they manage the business?
It's about both of those things that you've observed. And I'd add a third, actually, which is just around sort of general attributes. So we've undoubtedly seen that more new CEOs have experience beyond what were the 2 very traditional routes to the top, which were that of CFO and COO. This year, we've seen appointments to the CEO role from and by those who've held the office of Chief Risk Officer, Chief Strategy Officer. Interestingly, and probably no surprise to anyone watching, also the rise of the Chief Technology Officer into the CEO suite. Age has also been something of a gear change. And what we're seeing there is that the average age of appointment has come down just slightly globally from 50 to 49. What's interesting, actually, if we double click here in the UK, is that actually the average age of a UK CEO appointment sits higher than the rest of the world. That remains at 49. You could make that 45 for the rest of the world. The bottom line is,
Jenni,
if we look at the global data, this year's CEO tells us that the new CEO is slightly more likely to be female, but only slightly more likely, but is much more likely to be a non-national and to have cross-border experience.
Jenni, sorry to interrupt you. Look, I'm just interested. We all know that, of course, the CEO is just the top of the pyramid. But I want to know what's going on 1, 2, 3, 4 layers below. I asked you the question about gender and diversity more generally at the CEO level, and you expressed the same disappointment, which I express as well. You know, but in terms of what's going on below the hood, so to speak, as well, with the CEO only the most obvious manifestation of what's going on at boardroom. Anything exciting going on below the hood, at senior management level, at C-suite level, at boardroom level?
Yes, there is. I would observe that it's a mixed picture. So what we're typically seeing in organisations is that broader C-suite and perhaps 1 and 2 below the C-suite are now looking and feeling and being incredibly intentional about bringing in diverse talent. Where some organisations are struggling is in the layers 3, 4, 5 down from that, and making sure that where perhaps there's been slightly less intentionality, they're still managing to attract and retain diverse talent. So it's a mixed picture, but there's undoubtedly movement that's movement in the right direction in terms of organizations making it their purpose to achieve diversity.
We've got to say goodbye, Jenni, but thanks so much for bringing the report to us. Fascinating reading, just exactly how these trends are changing. Jenni Hibbert, Global Managing Partner at Heidrick and Struggles.